Let me maybe just introduce the first item on the agenda. We had to make a change to our agenda on Friday last week to include a briefing by the department on the policy directives that have recently been issued by Minister Malatsi. Let me thank the minister for honoring our invitation, and indeed it was an invitation, it was not summons. I've heard members of the media to great consternation by the minister saying he was summons to Parliament. And why I'm making that clarification is because a summons hold particular legal consequence and significance in terms of the rules of Parliament. So the minister was invited, he was not summoned. I think in terms of background, members will be aware we've been dealing with this issue for quite a while in terms of ICASA and licensing. And on the 21st of May, the minister issued policy directives on the need to issue new ECNS licenses, which is the Electronic Communications Network Services license. Then on the 23rd of May, the minister then issued another policy directive on broad-based black economic empowerment. Now, we thought that it was important to invite the minister to brief the committee on these directives for a number of reasons. One, we need to make sure that the minister at all times exercises his executive power in a rational manner, in a lawful manner. And then secondly, I'm sure it seemed quite curious to some of us who would have seen those directives. Firstly, the timing of the directives. I don't think I need to explain that as all of this was happening, the president was in the White House where discussions were expected to ensue relating to issues such as the licensing of Starlink. And secondly, then, given the fact that we do have other satellite operators in this country and there's never been a need to issue such policy directives, we thought all of that required that perhaps the minister must take us through his thinking and indeed the rationality and lawfulness of his actions. So without wasting any time, let me hand over to you, Minister.
Thanks very much, Chairperson. And I must indicate that I welcome this opportunity to engage with the Committee on the Policy Directives, particularly because obviously, given the fact that the Gazette was last week and it generated a lot of coverage and publicity, the committee saw it fit that we are then invited. And members would recall that in the previous engagements that we've had with the committee, going as back as last year, we've indicated the efforts from the department side around the full recognition of equity equivalent investment programs in the ICT sector. This is reflected also in the medium-term development plan of the 7th administration of the Government of National Unity. So this work predates the events of last week. Last week was the third layer in that process culminating in the Gazette. And I want to also just be clear that it's not about introducing a dispensation for any individual nor any company or introducing preference. The policy direction members would recall that we started working on it around September. On the 4th of October, as we are required by the process that outlines how policy directions must be handled, we released communication to ICASA in the form of a letter expressing an intention to issue a policy directive to provide policy clarity on the full introduction of equity equivalent investment programs in the ICT sector. That was followed by a public communication released on that specific day. And as required by the process, we submitted the draft policy direction to ICASA to give them an opportunity to be able to engage with it. So the events that then transpired afterwards was ICASA has an opportunity, because we are compliant with the process of the law, to establish its opinion on what it feels should be done in answering the question that we are attempting to answer, which is a reconciliation of the ICT sector codes and the ownership regulations around license ownership. So that process outlines the lawfulness of the intention of the policy directive, because it is prescribed under the Electronic Communications Act, particularly Section 3, which stipulates that the minister may issue to the authority, in this case ICASA, policy directives that are consistent with this act, national policies, and related legislation. And what we are trying to do is then grounded on that very foundation. And as I indicated, that once we had fulfilled the first step, which is to allow ICASA to engage with the policy directive, this circles back to the issue of the reference to ownership being held by persons from historically disadvantaged groupings. The regulations state that this must not be less than 30% or such other conditions or a higher percentage as may be prescribed under Section 43K of the ICASA Act. So that is what we relied on in the instituting of, one, the policy directive and the fundamental question that it seeks to answer. The policy direction refers specifically to the ICT sector codes, which were published under the prescripts of the BBBE Act, which we know was adopted in 2013. So the intention is to ensure that there is a whole and consistent application of the BBBE Act and the ICT sector codes. This includes a key element, which is to ensure that transformation takes place in the telecommunication sector, in the broadcasting sector, in the same way that is applicable in other sectors through the enablement of broad-based economic empowerment. And I think it's also important to take a step back to the formulation of the ICT sector codes, which were approved in 2016. And it provided for recognition, amongst other things, ownership element, the management control element, skills development, enterprise and supply development, and other specific contributions that are relevant to the sector. So this mechanism around equity equivalent programs and how they can be utilized and how they should be utilized in the sector is not a new invention. It's not an invention by me. It is an attempt, in my view, to say that in the formulation of any regulations in our sector, it has to be read consistently with the ICT sector codes, which emerge from the broad-based economic empowerment. And we know that this use of equity equivalent programs have been a long-standing regulatory tool that has been in place in the sector. The DTIC approved this in 2016. And I think it's important also at this stage to clarify that while the ECA, which guides policy making in our sector, and the ICASA Act do allow for ICASA to make the regulations, it also allows for ICASA, in making those regulations, that it must give effect to the whole parts of the ICT sector code. And my duty is to ensure that there is alignment between the codes, between the regulations, in fulfillment of all our national laws, in this case citing the BBBE Act. And I believe, and I strongly believe, that in terms of the process that we have followed, from the formulation of the policy directive, leading ultimately to the gazetting, we have followed the prescripts of what a ministerial policy direction should follow. We have also fulfilled the key step, which is the engagement with the authority being CASA. And I think this is also important because the consultation with the authority means that its submission must be given due consideration. It does not mean, one, that the regulator can stop a minister from exploring a policy direction, because there are two steps. The first step is the opportunity for the regulator to engage with the draft policy direction. The second step is post the public comment stage, which is where we are in now. We must take into consideration what each and every interested stakeholder or anyone who has views on this policy direction, and to have their views being aligned, to have their views being considered in the formulation of the policy. The other additional point that I want to bring to the attention of the committee is that in 2014, the DCDT amended the ECA, and it explained in the reasons for the amendment at the time, particularly the amendment of Section 9, subsection 2B, that the focus of this act has been changed from the empowerment of, and in brackets, historically disadvantaged groups, to broad-based black economic empowerment. Therefore, the required equity ownership by historically disadvantaged individuals in Section 9, subsection 2B has been retained for the time being, provided that broad-based black economic empowerment requirements may replace it in due course. And that is an important consideration because on assessment of the ownership regulations, it is my view that the regulations did not wholly take into consideration the reference that is being made, one, in the exploratory memorandum on the purpose of the amendments, and in particular, the reference to such other conditions as it is expressed in Section 9, subsection 2B of the provisions of Section 43K of the ICASA Act. It did not apply broad-based black economic empowerment, which is defined both in the ICASA Act and in the ECA, and its meaning is well articulated too. So, considering all of this, it is my view that to settle this question, the policy direction is the best avenue to answer this, to answer this question. In the end, colleagues, in the end, the ICASA regulations may continue, if the authority so chooses, may continue to require the 30% equity ownership by historically disadvantaged individuals. But what it must do is to also permit the commitments that are envisaged and articulated for in the ICT sector codes around valid conditions for applications for individual licenses, this meaning the equity equivalence program. So where are we now in terms of the process that I've outlined? Post the Gazette, we have a 30-day period in which all stakeholders, and by the volume of the contributions on this subject, it is very clear that there are multiple stakeholders who've got very interesting views on this, that they'll be able to make their submissions through that period. What is incumbent upon the ministry and the department is, in consideration of those inputs from the public, they must inform the final formulation of the policy direction, which will then be shared with the regulator as it is required. And in closing, Chair, I want to underpin this point.
The downfall of that is, and that's why we refer to a trading of licenses happened. So, as I said, on the one hand, you have the 490 licenses. On the other hand, if I'm new today and I want to apply for a new IECNS license, I'm not able to do that because I have to wait for the minister's policy direction. In the absence of that, for me to enter the market, the only way is I must go and negotiate with one of the existing 500 licensees, and I must try to procure such license. And that's the trade we're talking about. So out there, people pay a lot of money to then buy such licenses in the market, and then ICASA's role is then to consider a license transfer. So that's then, they just deal with license transfers, publish it for comment, see what the implications are, and do license transfer. So that's the dilemma we have, and these recommendations from ICASA will then give us evidence of what would be best from a policy and ultimately in the interest of society. Chair, and yes, we've managed to publish it last week. It is one of our APP targets of the department, and publishing it was part of the Q1 performance required, and that's why it was important to get it in the public domain, and currently it's therefore open for 30 calendar days, 30 working days. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Woods. Let me just check, is that it from yourselves, Minister?
Yes, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. I don't want to cast aspersions on the process because you yourself have also said that there is obviously a lot of public interest in this. But on this issue of the relationship between the two policy directives, I do want to just push you so that we all move from the same understanding. Am I correct to make the assumption that the license process, so for any new provider to be able to operate in the space, the license process needs to be needs to be opened. And the only way it can be opened is by you issuing a policy directive that it must be closed. And the policy directive of the 21st of May is the start of that process. That if the public comments come back and say, yes, you must open, then you can open and you can get new players in the sector. And then secondly, where then now the licenses are open, people can apply, then the policy directive of the 23rd of May then says, even for new licenses, then you may need to you may do away with the 30%. Is that a correct understanding? Would they flow like that in the event the comments came back and said, yes, open licenses, yes, remove the 30% in line with BE, like you were saying? Thanks.
Chair, I think it would be difficult to start preempting what the probable permutations would be, because for any convenience one may take any line that may suit their purview. But what Alf is advocating is that the dilemma right now is that if a new entrant, and Alf, please clarify this with regard to individual licenses, right? Right, with regards to the individual licenses, that is where the problem is right now, because in circulation already, you've got 490 licenses that are in the space. And the study and the report that was done by the Competition Commission, amongst other things, the cost to communicate, was looking at, is there sufficient competition in the space? And the dilemma that we're having is that for any prospective new entrant for an individual license, the only way they can enter the space is to enter into a negotiation with a current license holder for a transfer of that license, rather than an entirely new process of their own to get a license. And the policy directive then seeks to open that up so that it is done. And that's why we don't have a firm view as to whether the opening of that would ensure or achieve the objectives of that study by the Competition Commission around market competition leading to affordable cost to communicate.
Thank you. Mr. Owens, do you have any additions?
Thank you, Honourable Chair. So that really shows that there is an indirect correlation. But at the same time, if ICASA, for example, through their inquiry, find that we don't need such further licenses, then that would be the end of it, in all likelihood. So if there was a direct correlation and one needs the other, we would have rather just told ICASA open up. You must now issue and allow further licenses. We haven't done that. We've stepped back and we allowed the authority to do an inquiry on it. So if, for example, they do come back and they do say they still recommend, then yes, then such policy direction will eventually be issued, I guess, depending again now on the public consultation. But then, I mean, for us it'll take a month and a half. Then ICASA would have another 6 months at least. So that takes quite a long time. And if eventually because we issue the final policy direction on the matter, that'll probably take another period of time. So that could add a year to this process, which typically also shows that the correlation is more indirect than direct. In fact, today, if you're a new company and you want to enter the market quickly, you'll probably be better off just going and procuring a license. Your time to market would be much quicker than waiting for a possibility that this opening takes place on the other side in due course. But we want to emphasize, yes, coincidentally now there is this indirect correlation, but our process has started long ago, and we can probably retrieve ICASA correspondence of many years ago where they've pleaded that we do this opening because it causes unnecessary administration on their side, merely doing license transfers, which simply doesn't make sense. And the fact is, managed liberalization is history. It's been overtaken by events, and we needed to act on it at some point or later. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Watson, the Minister. Honourable members, I was still about to speak. I was going to say, I have received obviously a lot of correspondence from a number of political parties. I know Honourable Makubela would receive correspondence from parties not represented in this portfolio committee, I think including Build One South Africa and from the public. So I do want to open an opportunity for engagement on this. But Minister, also that correspondence we will be passing to you where you may not have received some of it, because I think it's important just so that you also get an appreciation of the issues. So I'm going to take hands. Let me start with Honourable Matafa, Honourable Sobrathi, Honourable Tambo, Honourable Chawuke, Honourable Shongo, Honourable Makubela, Honourable Bodlane, and Honourable Sitole. In that order, please.
Thank you, Chair. Let me take this opportunity to appreciate the opening remarks by the Minister and the presentation that is made. Chair, sitting here as lawmakers, we are brought by voters who elect the parties that we represent based on hopes that our manifesto commitments present to them. Now, looking at the policy directives as presented by the Minister and the Department for Public Participation, I think that they sort of dilute or undermine those particular hopes. Because I can just put a simple question. Why not open the licensing applications without including equity equivalent? Because here I'm raising this on the basis that the World Bank declares South Africa as the most unequal society in the whole world. The GNU statement of intent agrees with that. And one of the key focus areas is to ensure social justice and equity. So I'm a bit worried that a minister from a GNU party with that kind of a commitment in the statement of intent will bring, in my view, and in the view of the party that I represent, a policy directive that undermines that particular statement of the GNU. Chair, it is not only the World Bank. Let's come to the sector. In the report by ICASA State of ICT Sector Report of 2025, that report calls for a deeper transformation, particularly in ownership and management control by Black people. So I'm interested to find out from the minister, if before he kickstarted the process, did he solicit a view from ICASA that are this directive legislatively and constitutionally sound? Because it is not only the report by ICASA, the constitution of the country also calls for equality and redress. And the BEE Act sought to achieve that particular equality and redress. Chair, it's also the BEE Commission itself that laments the lack of transformation of the ICT sector. The sector features in the top 5 of the less transformed sectors in the country, amongst agriculture, property, and financial services. Would we be correct to say that this policy directive is not correct to be proposed under the current circumstances that the transformation agenda of the GNU that we represent and the African National Congress Party that I represent in this committee? Chair, I want to test something very quickly. I missed the name of the gentleman behind the acting DG. He cites the Altec court judgment. I'm just interested to find out, where does equity equivalent come in? Because our understanding of the judgment, it focused mainly on ICASA's role in the correct applications of Section 32, 92, and 93, in terms of allowing the license holders then to convert their licenses. Nowhere does it cite a directive by the minister to be issued. Therefore, in our view, Chair, this appears to us as a policy matter. It appears as just the minister giving ICASA authority to say, open up licenses. But don't tamper with the transformation agenda that this country has agreed to in terms of taking it forward. I'm sorry, Chair, I'm just going quickly through my notes. Now, I'm sort of concerned, Chair, with the minister's remark that when he states that ICASA as a regulator cannot stop the minister from proceeding with policy directive. That is a loaded statement. In my view, even if ICASA is not comfortable with what the minister is trying to achieve, it means that he will simply ignore the recommendation. And that is concerning, because one of the mandates of ICASA is to assist this government and this country to achieve constitutional values, and amongst them is the equality as well as social justice that I have mentioned, as were created by the unjust laws of the past. Chair, I will pause there, but safely to state that we request all parties and members who are of society who are interested in this matter to reject this particular policy directive. It goes against the values of what this society or what this government seeks to achieve. And I and the party that I sit in, I don't think we will support it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Matafa. Honorable Subrati.
Thank you, Chairperson. And Chairperson, let me start by saying that this matter has indeed gained a great amount of attention of South Africans and I think internationally. Largely because, Chairperson, this concerns the wealth of the land of South Africans. The Freedom Charter says very clearly that the people shall own the wealth of this land. An alternative equivalent to ownership speaks exactly against that principle, as Honorable Matafa has mentioned in our statement of intent, to which the Honorable Minister and his party are signatories to, that one of the goals is to promote social justice and equity in our land. And I think that is the cutting edge, that is the sore point, and we must not be naive to lose that point. As in my short stint as acting chair, I was challenged, the democracy of this country was challenged, and I stood by it. I will not be naive in this house to say that we cannot talk about this. So as a caucus of the ANC caucus in this portfolio committee, we were asked, and I whipped the ANC study group, I was asked for a public statement. I did not. We waited until yesterday, until the leadership of the African National Congress had met, and I got a briefing. I wanted to know very clearly, was any deal cut in America by the leadership? And I've got a clear-cut clarity from the African National Congress that there was no deal cut clearing the path for any Starlink regulations, as the public is calling it. So very, very clear, the African National Congress is clear. Our laws are sacrosanct. There is no backdoor to gaining entry. Anyone wanting to gain entry into this country, especially into the ICT sector, which is a sector that is most disadvantaged, as Honorable Matafa said, perhaps the most, must come to the front door. There is a 30% that is in place. So I would I'd like to ask the Honorable Minister, because we must not be naive to avoid the politics. The party that he represents, that is the Democratic Alliance, have they had any conversations with Elon Musk and Starlink that, whilst the minister has gotten pains to indicate that this is not, this is coincidental, I think South Africans need a very clear answer. Kati, that has your party posturing this now manje to solicit and to create the avenue for Starlink to come in? Certainly, the African National Congress position remains, as Honorable Matav has indicated. We will not support this policy directive. We will call for its withdrawal. Chairperson, having clearly identified our party position and requesting the Honorable Minister to make known his party positioning, and that there's been no back chat rooms taking place in America last week, I'd really like to ask, the EEIP that the Minister is proposing, how does that, what is the history of the EEIPs that have been in place thus far? And how have they benefited the people of our country tangibly, especially in terms of transformative agenda? Chairperson, another area that I wish to raise with the Honorable Chairperson is that he is considering that Section 9(2)(b) of the ECA clearly mandates a 30% HDG ownership for licensing. What is the legal justification for your policy, Mr. Minister, for your policy directive that aims to bypass this requirement, that equity equivalent programs would fall under a separate legislative framework? Are you not essentially trying to reshape the laws through unilateral action, thereby diminishing the authority of Parliament? Following on to that, what rationale underlies your decision to exempt the ICT sector specifically, whilst other industries such as mining and finance have consistently complied and continue to comply with the 30% HDG ownership requirement? Lastly, Chairperson, as the African National Congress, we continuously emphasize that ownership is a crucial pillar of economic transformation in our country. And how does allowing an organization such as Starlink, and I will bring Starlink and place it at the center of this house, to bypass equity participation align with the national policies aimed at promoting significant black ownership in the economy, particularly, Chairperson, in a critical sector such as telecommunications that has historically marginalized, disadvantaged South Africans? Chairperson, as I pause, may I also express my concern, as I've expressed previously, that the Honorable Minister has consistently surprised South Africans and this committee, such as the withdrawal of the SABC bill. We heard of it in media. Such as the intended CETA regulations. Again, we hear of it in the media. Chairperson, I wish to record my concern that we would really like to be taken into confidence by the Minister, so that this portfolio committee and the Minister can work collaboratively to benefit our countries, rather than using the media as a means to which this portfolio committee is communicated to. Thank you so much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Subrathi. Honorable Tambo.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and to the Minister and to the Department for the presentation and for the spirited contributions from Honorable Subrathi and other members of the committee. My concern is that it seems like the Minister is trying to amend legislation using a ministerial policy directive. And I'll tell you why, because you use the word alignment, and I think you do it deliberately instead of amendment. So I think you're trying to effect amendments using a ministerial policy directive to the Electronic Communications Act, as well as to the ICT Sector Code, which is a product of the BBBE Act. Because in your policy directive communication, you say that you seek to align the two. I'm interested as to what would the consequence of that alignment look like? How do you achieve alignment outside of changing legislation? Because the ICT Sector Code, as much as it might be a regulatory instrument under the Department of Communications, it's a product of the BBBE Act. And to give a ministerial directive on the ICT Sector Code, which belongs to that specific act, which is regulated by the Department of Trade and Industry, confuses me. On the Electronic Communications Act, which speaks to the 30% ownership as well, I would imagine that an amendment of that, or an alignment of that with the ICT Sector Code, would require some level of amendments to either both pieces of legislation or one. One doesn't belong to the Department of Communications. It's a product of an act of the Department of Trade and Industry. The other is an act of Parliament. When you want to achieve this alignment, how do you seek to achieve it using a ministerial policy directive? And I think that speaks to the overstepping of powers, or overstepping of executive powers that has been spoken to in the House. That is my primary legislative concern. But also conversely, I mean, we're talking about Starlink here. I don't think we should tiptoe around it. We're talking about Starlink. There might be many other foreign satellite companies that have interest in operating in South Africa, but there's a specific interest in Starlink, and I think Siklo will speak to the political context about that as well. But I'm interested in, has there any been consideration of the impact the introduction of foreign satellite companies operating in South Africa would have on the local telecommunications industry, specifically as it relates to jobs? Because there's a myth going around here that the introduction of Starlink will achieve two things, that it will achieve rural access to internet connectivity, and as well will increase jobs. How will a satellite that will operate and be ran remotely from another country impact on the local telecommunications sector's jobs? And considering especially the high unemployment rate in this country. But secondly, what is the knowledge of the department on the costs related to the introduction of foreign satellite operators? Will it necessarily bring higher connectivity levels to rural communities? Will it be cheaper? Comparative to what? And
has there been any consideration of the other spheres within which Starlink operates and the regulatory frameworks in the other countries that they operate in, whether they abided by them as set in stone? Because we're aware that they are operating in India with much stricter ownership regulatory existence in terms of local ownership there. We know there's been a challenge in Taiwan, in Japan. Why are we altering our legislation for Starlink, whereas where it goes to operate in other countries, it did not utilize this coercion for us to change our laws in order for it to operate in South Africa? So I'm interested in the legislative aspect of it, and I think we'll talk further after we get clarity on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Tambo. I think it was Honorable Chawuke after. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. If you don't mind, I will remain seated. Greetings to honorable members and also to the Minister and his delegation. Chairperson, I think I've been greatly covered by my fellow colleagues, but one would also want to find out, in terms of the position of the Honorable Minister in his policy directive or recommendation for gazetting, one would want to understand whether it has been taken into consideration, not only through his political party, but as a minister, as an official in cabinet, the consequences that this will have on the ordinary South Africans. Ultimately, looking at whether it will provide an opportunity for SMMEs who are in the sector to have an opportunity to become service providers in the space. And additionally, it would be what type of consultation has taken place also with the Department of Innovation and Science. We do know that Innovation and Science has a particular program and project that they are running as well. And one would want to see if this was a unilateral decision that was taken, or was there consultation and consultation that is befitting and sufficient to really put a case study forward? Chairperson, also just taking into consideration, and I think this was said by Honorable Sobrathi, in terms of how the Minister has conducted himself with the policies and perhaps how he seeks to amend transformative policies, one is quite concerned in terms of whether we are progressing or regressing. And perhaps through your guidance and your leadership, Chairperson, you will guide us in terms of the proximity or the reach of the Minister and this portfolio committee in terms of those amendments and perhaps the recommendation. And I think it's quite important for us to re-emphasize that as a portfolio committee and as part of our oversight and our responsibility, we are finding out decisions that are made by the Minister on social media and through media platforms. And one would want to have an appreciation that the Minister is regularly invited to this platform and to this portfolio committee to take us into confidence on developments of the department. And I think this was said by Honorable Matafa, if I'm correct, to the question to say, or was it yourself, Chairperson, to say, did he sit and then make a decision? Or is this a political party directive and political line of march that is currently being displayed? And we must understand that, as indicated by my colleagues as well, we must take a very clear stance that we're not going to derail from a transformative agenda where we seek to improve the lives of the most vulnerable and create economic opportunities. And I think what is clearly displayed here is leaving an opportunity for international players to come through the back door without consequences, and therefore removing or creating a greater vacuum from those who are in the local market from actually competing. And I think this is what these recommendations that are brought forward by, and I'm going to call them recommendations by the Minister, seek to achieve, and more especially favor business rather than look at the interest of South Africans and those who are previously disadvantaged from opportunities. And how do we ensure that these economic opportunities are really deeply rooted in providing or being distributed with the previously disadvantaged in our communities? The last part, Chairperson, I think one wants to find, or second to last would be, in terms of the travel that has been done or that has taken place through the department, what are some of the findings that the Minister can give as part of the case studies for us to really understand what type of not conversations, but discussions are taking place through your international travels? Because this starts to raise some great concerns, and especially around Starlink, to say, are we having our GNU partners, GNU leaders, and other political parties perhaps in the background utilizing their proximity to advance their own political agenda and create alliances internationally? And it must be cautioned, and I think perhaps it must be clearly stated. And then the last part, Chairperson, in terms of the department, it's not consequence, but its ability to measure the risk, its risk analysis. What are the risk analyses that have been conducted in terms of what has been pronounced by the Minister? And does the department have the financial capacity to even take this legally? Chairperson, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you very much, Honorable Chawuke. I didn't see Honorable Alicia's hand, so I don't want to leave you. So yeah. Honorable Alicia? Oh, you're saying no? Okay. That she wants to come after Honorable Makuben. It was Honorable Makuben and Honorable Shong.
Yes, thank you so much, Chairperson. Appreciate this time. Thank you, Minister, for gracing us, and our greetings to all the officials and interested parties, my colleagues here. Minister, you are at pains to explain the inexplainable in our view. The clandestine unilateral approach that you took in providing this policy directive is, for us, very bizarre and very abnormal. This is supposed to be a transparent process, according to Section 9 of our Constitution. The public should be aware of it, there should be engagement, and the institutions, at least that you preside over, should be aware of this process. Now, Minister, when you do a policy directive, you're supposed to do a detailed consultative stakeholder engagement. We have not seen that. We've mentioned that even in our letter to you. We're supposed to see your regulatory impact assessment that you would have conducted that would lead you to do this policy directive. We have not seen that. Now you are in a hurry to bring these multinational players, such that, Minister, you are even tripping all over yourself with your colleagues there to tell us about 490 license holders. These are historically disadvantaged groups that have ECNS and ECS license. You raise other questions besides those that we came with. Now you talk about competition, you want to create competition. You've got 490 historically disadvantaged license holders, that all of them are sitting at home. You have given them licenses without support, without financial backing, without any technical backing. And now you are even saying to multinationals, you don't need to partner with these 490 historically disadvantaged groups. We are going to find a way to avoid you giving them 30% of Triple BEE Act imperatives in terms of equity, ownership, management, and control of the ICT sector. You are issuing this policy directive in the guise of creating competition. You are issuing this policy directive in a guise of trying to enable some sort of digital inclusion. You have it sitting right in front of you. The fact that there was a moratorium by ICASA under your department, Minister, to say we're not going to issue any further licenses, but we're going to support the current license holders, ensure that they partner with multinationals that come into the country, ensure that they can breathe, they get capital, they get supported. Have you consulted these 490 license holders in this policy directive? Have you heard from them? What are their limitations in terms of providing connectivity as their licenses are demanding them to? Now, it sounded as if you actually cared for these historically disadvantaged groups that are sitting with licenses that have become useless. But you issued these licenses, then you left them to the sharks. You threw them to the sharks. We only have two dominant players in the telecoms industry in this nation, MTN and Vodacom. And these poor license holders must now contend to be some last mile connector somewhere if by luck they manage to get any project that comes their way. You have not told us any of the support that you're offering to these license holders. I think your reason of competition is really flimsy, it's frivolous. It should not even have been raised in this platform. What you should be doing is to ensure that these 490 are empowered enough to be able to create competition for the two dominant, so that we get our data costs low and we're able to give coverage to the underserviced rural and remote areas. Now, Minister, that was in response to what you spoke about. The Digital Communications and the Communications and Digital Technologies Department has been mandated to enable South Africa's digital transformation. To date, we can tell you that you have achieved no digital inclusion. You have not created any economic growth for the country or enabled the government to create any further employment or economic growth. You have not achieved universal access or any objectives that are spelled out in the ICT white paper. We ask ourselves sitting here then, what is the point of this department? With billions of rands that have already been funneled into your entities, we anticipated an ICT revolution in your operations. If not for the disastrous Oval meeting in the White House, which descended into a televised spectacle in which South Africa was subjected to a global ridicule as a barbarian, violent nation, pressured into abandoning its sovereign laws to appease the billionaires and multinationals like Starlink, with an investment pitch that turned into a violent crime scene of us slitting each other's throats, raping our women over and over again. If not for that scenery, where your department, Minister, became a center stage, that you have failed to provide technology that will cover our borders, that will monitor crime on our streets and in our homes and rural areas. You failed to provide connectivity that will give our children online schooling. You failed to provide connectivity in police stations such that we're able to remotely report cases and the police are able to respond to cases immediately. If not for the failures of the telecommunications department, perhaps that spectacle of the White House would not even have happened. Minister, we had even forgotten about you and your department, if not for that meeting, let alone why we are even doing this digital inclusion and migration in the first place. But let's begin here. Blessed memory, Minister Mutsipe Kasaburi was a visionary who announced in 2007 digital migration. And she started all sorts of ICT revolutionary stuff for this nation. White papers that will give us digital inclusion. And the cabinet approved that. And the first digital signal was switched on in November 2007. Minister, it has been downhill from there. And unfortunately, you have joined the gang of the downhill. Because of the inability of this government, we have failed to meet every single deadline for digital inclusion, digital migration, to ensure that a rural child in South Africa can connect to the internet, can learn online, and can access research on internet. I can go to town to list all the failed deadlines from 2011, 2013, 2015, going to your research, 2021. The latest deadline that you had set yourself, you were sitting there, was 31 March 2025, which came and went. No digital migration. Let's talk about ASA Connect. Since 2015, you're going to connect 4,000 schools. We're sitting here with less than 599 schools that have been connected. It's a disgrace. Your predecessors that I'm going to name, that have all come and gone, sitting there. The former Minister Nyanda, 2009, 2011, former Minister Padeyachi, former Minister Pule, former Minister Karim, former Minister Kwele, former Minister Mutambi, former Minister Jodlo, former Minister Kuba Ngubani, former Minister Stella Ndabeni, Nomvula Mkonyani, Ntabeni, Ngungubele, and now here you are, 2024, and hopefully to 2025, because we can't afford another disaster like this. This department has been a disastrous waste of money. We actually get migraines thinking about the billions that have been spent to connect schools, to connect our rural areas over the past 20 years, with all of these ministers that I have counted. Over 10 billion rand spent. USAF has billions of rands to connect rural schools, to connect rural areas, to connect hospitals. Our questions now remain, who is actually benefiting from this disaster? Who is now going to benefit from this current disaster that you have created for us through this illegal and unlawful Regulation 17.8? Let's bring it now to SITA, where there's a new fraternity now with SITA. This is the entity that the White House was talking about. SITA was supposed to have provided ICT technology to the government in its entirety. Since 1999, when it was formed, SITA has managed to achieve nothing. Claims of corruption leveled against it, leadership, instability, governance failures, and the list goes on. To an extent where you yourself, Minister, you've called on the Public Service Commission to launch a comprehensive investigation into this agency. That today, you are sitting here using, maliciously so, its regulations, illegally so, to try and advance an agenda that goes against our constitutional transformative agenda of this nation, even our national development plan itself. Now, when we watch that ill-prepared, not yet, Minister, we've been waiting, sorry, Minister, waiting. We've been waiting for this. I will not be long, but I need an opportunity to express this. It's of national interest. We waited for everybody who was late to arrive here, so may we kindly have this opportunity to express. It's our one opportunity. Our constituencies are listening to what we are saying. Those ill-prepared GNU delegation that was at the White House describing the failures. Minister, they were describing the failures of SITA. They were describing your failures as a Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies. They were describing the failures of Centec, the failures of USASA, the failures of Broadband Infraco, USAF, and all that money that has been spent. Over 6,000 employees under your watch, employed to provide what you want Starlink to come and do for you. Frankly, we think that meeting, that whole fiasco, Minister, was a vote of no confidence on you. Your party leader sitting there, John Steenhuisen, the president, and all the other ministers and their billionaire friends have actually issued a vote of no confidence on you. And hence, they are begging Starlink to come and do your job, and the 6,000 people that this government is paying on a monthly basis to do this very work. And what is your response to all of this, Minister? Hardly 48 hours after the fact, you truly are affirming what they were saying, that you are out of your depth, and without due process and lack of judgment call, you went and issued an unlawful, unconstitutional gazette. So here we are today. An SMK party, through this committee, we're here to provide oversight. Over the past 30 years, oversight was just reduced to ineffectiveness, pushing partisan agendas. That time is over. We are not going to sit and overlook illegal acts, incompetence, and corruption. We understand what this means, what BBBE means, what the Constitution means when they talk about transformation, what the ICASA Act means, what the SITA Section 23 means. We understand all of this. It means a job opportunity for a township and rural child somewhere. Minister, the gravity of that gazette that you so casually signed, it's a denial of a constitutional right of a historically disadvantaged group to own the economy, to participate in the ICT sector, and to own land in this country. Those of us who have single citizenship and single passport, and many others who vote for us, they want an opportunity to play in the ICT sector. They are tired of equity equivalent handouts. They are tired of multinationals that are going to come in here and give them crumbs and train them without meaningful, sustainable ownership, control, and transformation. Our letter as MK Party was very clear. There is no multinational that will evade the BBB Act of ownership, control, and management, the 30% as provided by the Act. As I draw to close now, Minister, it's a pity that we can't directly put a motion of no confidence on you as MPs and as a party, because you have delegated authority, you are appointed by the President. But in the light of that, these are my 4 questions to you. Why should we keep you as a Minister of DCDT? When are you reversing this unlawful gazette? Who pressured you to do this? You are under oath. Who pressured you? Who instructed you to do this? Because you seem like an intelligent man. Maybe in the words of Rupert, you seem like a changed man. Who is pressuring you to do this? Tell us who in your department, the departments that you oversee, advised you to do this gazette, because we want to know them. Because those are the incompetent people that after we release you, we need to go after them as well. Finally, again, Mr. Minister, when can we expect your resignation letter? I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Makubela. Honorable members, I want to plead with you. It's 11:49.
Check. My apologies to interrupt you. I missed the second question on the 4 concluding questions that the honorable member asked. So I would really, and I'm not being distracted.
Number one was,
Why should we keep you? So I missed the second one.
Honorable Makubela. Honorable Makubela, could you repeat your second question?
You see now, I'm not sure if I can do it with the same passion. So, but the second one was, when are you reversing the unlawful gazette? You got the other ones? Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Podlania.
Chair, I'm trying to gather my thoughts so that I can really speak in an organized manner. But I think with everything said and done, it's not possible. The first thing that I want to say is that it is true that if an accident happens and all of us witness it, we are all going to have different stories of what happened. Someone will say it was a red car, another one say it was mauve, the other one said it was maroon. And it will not matter what the facts are. I think Minister, in his opening remarks, covered a lot of the questions that I even myself had. And unfortunately, we came here with closed, and let me not put it that way, we came here with some intentions and we are not going to move. I think whatever the minister does, there is never going to be a correct answer. But before I get into the chairperson, perhaps on a housekeeping matter, like you say, it's 12 now. And Chair, 1 o'clock we have to leave because we have to be in the house. We really have to manage our meetings better. And I know you are not going to be one-to-one to gag members, but we really have to manage. As things stand, you've got the SABC, who has come in here, and another entity, and ICASA. They are all here on taxpayers' money to address this house, and I don't think they will get that opportunity. So that's that. Chair, I think the point that I wanted to make, and it's a comment, it's not a question. My understanding, and the minister can correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding of this is that the minister has gazetted the policy directive so that interested parties can comment on this. How I am understanding the minister is saying, I am not married to this. I am seeing a gap, and I am making a directive to ICASA to say, go test the market, to say the stakeholders in this sector, would they be open to something like this? The minister has not come here to impose this on South Africans. It is really regrettable that even some of us in this room have framed it that way in the media. As responsible public representatives, we really could have done better. And for me, for my part, from what the minister has said, he has filled a lot of gaps. And for your part, Chairperson, for bringing this issue into the portfolio committee today, I really commend you, because we've seen where things happen outside and we are not party as the portfolio committee. So that part, I give you. But Chair, what minister is saying is that there is going to be 30 days from the day of the gazette for any interested party to make comments. And all of us in this room are choosing to ignore that little fact, because we want to use this as this process for political expediency. Minister has gracefully sat there while he is being insulted, his person and his name being questioned, his integrity, his values being questioned, brought into question, his own family, and he has graciously sat there. And Chair, I was hoping that this meeting would not generate to that, because I think we are one of those portfolio committees that really work in a collegial manner. So this is really regrettable. And my advice to Minister, do not let it generate to a personal attack. Do yourself a favor and do not answer the attacks that have been done on your person. Chair, what we are hearing is that the process, as far as October 2024, was initiated by the department. When the minister came in, it's almost a year now that the minister has been there. Clearly, when he came in October, he had been there for a few months, when the department that he then inherits, the good, the bad, and the ugly he has inherited, started having a conversation about changing, about giving a policy directive. Are we saying and Honorable Makubele has listed all the ministers, and what they have achieved is quite questionable. Are we saying we want a minister that will sit on his hands or a minister that will try to transform the sector? Because all he is saying is, let us test the waters. And Chair, if this was happening in October, and I've been saying even in the media, for me it is a real coincidence that this happens on the back of the visit to the White House. In fact, Chairperson, to yourself and members of your political committee, perhaps there is an issue of network in this venue. But the President of the African National Congress, Cyril Ramaphosa, is on record in the media saying this morning about the directive that the minister has given, things that are desirable need to be supported by many people. So maybe ANC members must refresh their phones so that they understand where the leader of their political party is on this. As I see in the media, the president is saying there was no conversation about all of this in the White House. As we all know, the minister was not at the White House. South Africa. So perhaps it is just an advice to members of the ANC to say, refresh your phones and get a different story from your leadership. Chairperson, what gives me comfort is that the minister is clear about wanting to test this. He is saying, while we have had transformative laws in South Africa, they have not produced the desired results where there is broad access to internet. What we are seeing at the moment in South Africa is, in the world globally, is developments in the sector. And I have said it before to say South Africa has failed to move with the times. We have had no will to really catch up with the world. On everything, we are on the back foot because we hide behind the term transformation. And the minute we hide behind the term transformation, we want to also bring in the issue of BEE. And we refuse to talk about what BEE has done to the men, for the men on the street. What the directive is saying, there should be equity equivalent. And the directive is saying, let us test the possibility of saying, if not a BEE 30% ownership by the company, an equity equivalent of 30%. There is nothing foreign about what we have had. But if we are to agree with what the minister is saying we must test, then it leaves no room for our political expediency. Then it leaves no room for us to be able to grandstand. So, Chairperson, I do not have questions per se, but I thought I would speak to those things. And thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Honorable Bodlana. Honorable Sithole?
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson, and thank you to the Minister and the Office of the Minister and the Department for their presentation. Actually, it helped us to understand the stand of the Minister and the Department. But what worries me, Honorable Chairperson, is that as a portfolio committee, we've never been informed. We just hear this on media on Friday, which was actually a disgrace because we're supposed to know as a portfolio committee. I don't know the processes and the procedure that's supposed to be followed by the minister when it's come to cabinet. Did they inform the cabinet? What is their position when they inform them? And Honorable Chairperson, ngicabanga ukuthi mina ANC akayilome indwalo, akayinoya indwalo. Futhi ayiqotha amazenze. Why ngisho kanje? There was that meeting in White House. The following week there was an announcement from the minister. The minister was not in White House, but the leader of the day was in White House. We don't know what happened behind us. Nobody knows. So that's why I say, Honorable Chairperson, the issue of triple PEE, that 30%, Honorable Chairperson, I think that one is the must. It's not obligations. It's a must for the country to have it. Honorable Chairperson, the ICASA, on the 5 to 7 February 2025, they received 50 submissions from interested members with the focus of a proposed new licensing framework regarding satellite services. The question is, where are they now? When it comes to this now, what does the ICASA say? We have our own entities, which is SATEC and ICASA and Broadband, who is supposed to drive the process of this directive. So now I'm trying to check the working relationship between the minister and his entities, especially ICASA. Because the minister, when he briefed us, he says, they did submit to ICASA, but I never received any response from ICASA, what ICASA says. What SATEC have said about what is happening, because when we was doing our own oversight, there's a lot of things that happen in SATEC, So now which need to be taken into consideration. And ICASA have got their regulations to be implemented. So I'm trying to check on our Chairperson, because you see, if you're talking about equity equivalent investment and programs, where are our people there? Where are our vulnerable people? Especially if I'm from rural areas. I know some suffering that they are facing. So now I'm trying to check on Honorable Chairperson. Where are they when this draft was crafted? But Honorable Chairperson, I think your advisor, Honorable Minister, are not good. And not good in such a way that from when you was withdrawing the SAPC Act, SAPC Bureau Act. You never informed the committee. So we don't know what was behind the scene. And then now you didn't actually inform us as a portfolio committee. So now I'm trying to check on which person your advisors. So now, Honorable Chairperson, I cannot say a lot, but as the Inkatha Freedom Party, we have our caucus on Thursday. I am going to table the proposed from Minister, and then the outcome will be from the caucus. I cannot say I'm not going to support as the NCF says. I'm not going to say anything as DA trying to protect the Minister, but I'm saying we mustn't protect the Minister. We must protect the country and the people of South Africa. Thank you very much.
Siyabonga Job ukuthi inkathi ibingekho yena eWashington. Inkathi ibingekho eWashington. Honorable Lishe, followed by Honorable Mkhakha, and then Honorable Ndlela, you'll be the last. Thank you. It's 12:10.
2 minutes, Chair.
Good morning, Chairperson and colleagues. Good morning, Minister. Minister, does it not bother you that this will lead to endless legal battles? Because I can assure you that as the EFF, we are going to challenge this unconstitutional proposal, not only in Parliament, but we'll make sure that we explore all legal mechanisms, because we are not about to accept a situation where our laws are rewritten in Washington. I'm wondering, Minister, if it really does not bother you that you are setting a wrong precedence of bending backwards when you are being bullied. Because we can't, like we've said with my colleagues, that this is about Starlink, this is about Washington. So now we have a bunch of bullies bullying you, and you are bending backwards for them. And then you make it seem like this has been in process. I don't think this has been in process, because I think if that was the case, this committee would be aware that this has been in process. But like my colleagues have been saying, that this is an issue we heard about in the media. I'm wondering if maybe it doesn't bother you that you're making us look weak, that when racists are throwing toys, right, and are hating on black people in our country, and you are giving them what they want. Because this started when the government of this country signed an act, the Land Expropriation Act, into a bill, and they started spreading these lies and disinformation about us. So clearly these are people who hate the laws of this country. Why would a billionaire have a problem of 30% black ownership? This is a billionaire who is not belonging in this country and doesn't want people of this country to own anything. Does it not bother you that you are taking people who hate black people and you want them to operate in this country and they're not even contributing anything? They are not going to be jobs that are created here. They don't want ownership of black people. They don't want black people to own land. They don't want black people to own anything. These are the people who see the majority of the people in this country as nothing. And it doesn't bother you that these are the people you want to operate in this country for free. There are many things that we can prioritize, Minister. There is an issue that could be of priority, which is the full digital migration, which is supposed to assist to assist and boost the digital access. And those are the issues that you're not looking at. There are issues that we can prioritize instead of favoring foreign countries. Talking to ICASA to have a conversation and force big telecoms like Vodacom and MTN to ensure that they improve connectivity and they lower data. But those are the things that we are not doing. You are making us look incompetent. You are making us look like we don't know what we are doing because you are favoring racists. These are people who are racist. We can't allow them in this country. As the EFF, we reject anything that has got to do with Starlink. We're saying we know what should be done. We should prioritize what should be done, and then we must just do that what needs to be done and not allow our laws to be rewritten in Washington. Thank you very much, Chairperson. Thank you, Honorable Alicia. Honorable Mkhakha.
Thanks, Honorable Chair. It's not my intention to rehash what my colleagues have said in this meeting. But I think it's important as the African National Congress to emphasize some points that I think are very important to this discourse. The Gazette is not just a minor issue. It presupposes that a proper research and a feasibility study was done by the department. And my expectation was that that report will be shared with the portfolio committee so that we understand the context and the content of what you are presenting to us today. And perhaps Minister must share with us that report. Was what a portfolio committee that represents the most disadvantaged society, the black majority in this country, the overall society that is struggling to make ends meet on a daily basis. So the question of feasibility study for me was supposed to be a starting point. 2,
the evaluation and assessment of the sector itself, so that we are able to identify loopholes, shortcomings, weaknesses, so that as you are making a presentation, we are able to be convincing on the basis of facts that indeed this is exactly what led me to take this decision as far as this matter went. The third issue is in relation to your interaction with ICASA as a regulator. My expectation was that, and perhaps you are going to respond to it, the feedback given by ICASA to you, and how have you handled that feedback, given the responsibilities and roles that you have, both of you, ICASA vis-a-vis the ministry. What has been the feedback on this matter? Are you, Minister, and you can read the mind, because we're politicians here, internationalists for that matter. We can read between lines. And I think these members are beginning to share the posture they are adopting on the matter. Are you really aligning or amending the act? But the honesty from your side would assist you and us, so that the question of amendment, Parliament has got a due process that you must follow, certain protocols that you must follow. Are you really amending the act under the pretext that you are aligning? What exactly are you attempting to do? What advice have you got from the officials? I'm raising this, Chair, because, Honorable Chair, because supposedly the minister has got illegal advice from the legal gurus, whether a regulation can amend an act. Whether a regulation can amend an act, because an act is law. And if then you would have got this advice, surely something to be clarified as far as that is concerned. It's a matter for us when we're trying to delve deeper on this question of the presentation. It's a department, this act affects a variety of departments. So we don't have a monopoly over this act. It affects other departments. And what has been the process of interacting with other departments that led you alone to reach this particular point? The equity equivalence. Are you opening a window here? Are you in a business of opening a window for Starlink? Are you attempting to open a window for Starlink? And I'm not going to talk about coincidence and whatever. I'm going to be objective as far as this matter is concerned. Because us, we're taking into account, we're not dealing with this matter of satellites, a mega satellites, and the evolution of satellites in the country. We know of Vodacom, MTN, etc., that have installed satellites. You know that there are foreign satellites here, your Ducon, your Quiwong satellites, are part of this dispensation currently in the country. And some are privately owned, some are individually owned, and some are state-led satellites. Have you weighed which one is more relevant as far as that is concerned? Starlink, sorry, it's an individual kind of a partnership with Trump, etc., etc. They're trying to fool us as a country to believe that Elon Musk, it's an imperative, it's an agenda to fully control the digital space of this country. Hence, we're very sensitive on the matter because the sovereign security risks are very important when we're dealing with this matter, particularly on a service provider that has pronounced itself. It has pronounced itself because it started by demonizing the entire country, all of us here, demonizing all of us here. And therefore, the question of loyalty as you enter into partnership becomes critical politically as you are dealing with these matters. Have you taken into account such factors?
As you conclude, Honorable Nkaka.
As I'm conclude, Chair, the chemistry of mega satellites is a very important matter. Maybe it's a matter a committee must find time and engage on it so that we're not taken for the ride for certain external forces that are beginning to erode the country. I thought maybe it would be better if you are saying you're considering increasing the stakes for our people as far as this is concerned. But the issue for me is your responsibility as a minister, the responsibility of ICASA. Are you able to balance as two bodies, to balance your interest as you are advising government? Because the expectation is that we're supposed to be advising government. If you are developing an act, you are amending an act, surely there are certain protocols that you have not yet followed. And therefore, this question of Gazette for me remains questionable. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Honorable Ndlela, you will be the last. Please manage time.
No problem.
Brainwash.
Minister,
Okay.
it has been brought to our attention that Starlink is actually operating in South Africa. And that being the case, it's operating illegally in this country. And I'll tell you why. There's an organization, a company called ICASA Sepush. I don't know if you're aware of a company called ICASA Sepush. That company, the landing page states the following. We are dedicated to bringing reliable internet to Africa with sparkling, and we know stars sparkle, technology and commitment to service. We're here to connect wherever you are in South Africa. Stay connected, stay empowered, and unlock endless opportunities. It is now operating in Mozambique, and it is selling equipment, satellite equipment, for Starlink connectivity. Now, our understanding, and by the way, this company is based in Centurion now. They have actually an office and a physical address. Now, what is also concerning, Minister, if you go to their website, there's a part there that speaks to working strategies to keep Starlink connected in South Africa. It says, despite Starlink not being officially licensed in South Africa, many users remain successfully connected through a combination of proven workarounds and reliable subscription plans. And it then goes on to say, based on our testing and feedback from the community and the strategies below, please find currently the most effective ways to keep your Starlink kit online and functioning without interruption. Now, Minister, this is happening right under your nose. We are busy talking grounds for even discussed in the first place. The other point, Minister, that I want to raise is that, this reminds me, especially if you look at the comments that were made by the owner of Starlink, where he said he will switch off Starlink, this wasn't for Ukraine, and it will end all the fronts of communication for the army. Now, if we give that kind of a person powers to connect our people, that alone is a huge risk for this country, because the sovereignty and the security of this country and the defense thereof will be in the hands of one person who can at a whim decide to switch off this country's communications. And as you know, if you go to war, maybe you don't know, there are three things you focus on. You switch off the water, you switch off electricity, and importantly, you switch off communication. Now, you want to give that kind of a person that's operating illegally in the country that kind of power? The other point is then, it takes me back to Radio RSG, which I see our members from the SABC are. Radio Sandogensa. 1937 it was founded. And that was exactly that, a radio without borders. And was used by the apartheid government, by the way, to communicate. By the way, that radio station is the only radio station in the country where you can actually connect anywhere without any interruption of frequency. What I'm seeing here is this Starlink, supposedly for farmers, being another radio Sondagenza of apartheid model, which can be used to achieve certain agendas. As you know, we have issues of racism and issues of farmers that have been raised in this country. What I'm seeing here is another radio Sondagenza of apartheid regime, which is going to be used for whatever purposes that they want to use it for, which we know will not be in the favor of this country. So, Minister, what are you going to do about that? How can...
Thank you. Honorable Vilakazi ngiyacela tu. I will give you, I don't want to shut down anybody, but please help us. I have to make an intervention before you and Honorable Mkhacha speak, so please help us.
I know that, Chair, and thank you for the indulgence. I did have my hand up and you missed me in the one round. I'm largely covered by my colleague, Chair, and I wasn't sure whether I was shocked or amused or just bemused by the conduct of my fellow colleagues here today. Just the fervor with which the attacks were piled upon the minister. I thought I was going to see froth coming out of the mouths or smoke coming out of the ears. And it was interesting to me, firstly, to note what my colleague pointed out to Honorable Bojani, what the colleagues in the committee are saying and what the president is saying at the exact same time, that in juxtaposition with one another. In fact, I thought it's maybe a great example, Chair, of the separation of party and state. With the party saying one thing, on the other side, the state is saying something different, although it could also just indicate dysfunction in this case. The other point that I wanted to make, Chair, is there's an elephant in the room here. In spite of all these comments that are being made, there's an elephant in the room that is being conveniently ignored or forgotten about. Professor William Gumede from WITS was on Newsroom Africa, I think it was yesterday, if not the day before, talking about the impact, and he's not the only one, by the way, he's just one of many, talking about the so-called, the alleged impact of broad-based black economic empowerment. According to him, more than R1 trillion has been poured into BEE initiatives, ownership, these equity initiatives that are being so hotly protected here. Over R1 trillion has been poured into those to benefit no more than 100 individuals. His words, not mine. It is well known that these things that are being so passionately protected benefit only a select few, and according to him, linked to a political party that we shall not mention, although we know who, or trade unions linked to that political party. So for me, when I see the fervor with which this is being protected, it makes me wonder whether it's really about the people of South Africa or about protecting certain interests and those people who have the wherewithal and the lines within to benefit at the expense of the entire country. On the other hand, Chair, we have examples of EIPs. in the country, and I'll talk about the ones in the sector only, not broadly, that have actually achieved amazing success. If you look at the IBM EEIP, instituted, I think, since 2015, which has IBM poured more than 700 million rand into that. It has to date impacted many people who have gone on to take postgraduate study in the ICTs as well as enterprise development. Lots more people than BEE. Microsoft, in their own EEIP, have poured money into skills development as well as enterprise development. And in my understanding, and I'll put the question to the minister, I guess, because in my understanding, the minister is not saying, let us do away with 30% ownership. He is saying, let us introduce this other way, which will also not only enable other role players to take part within the sector in the country, but will also result in this transformation that we all so desire. In my view, Chair, empowering over 150,000 people, as has happened with some of these training initiatives, qualifies for transformation far more than benefiting a couple of hundred people through these multi-billion rand ownership schemes. Ngiyabonga, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, honorable members, for all of your inputs. I'm going to have to plead with you, unfortunately, on two things. One is the amount of time. Honorable Bodlani did say we're supposed to have a hard stop at 1. I'm hoping those members who are attending physically at the dome will just be walking across. I don't know if lunch has been prepared, because I know that people normally want to have lunch before, but I'm going to request that we give the minister sufficient time to respond. So we will give him as long as it takes, because you also took as long as you took. And then on the second issue, I think Honorable Bodlani is correct. Members, we've really tried to give you an opportunity to express yourself, but we keep running into problems. So with your permission, I think from the next meetings that we're going to have, we will have to give you a time limit when you speak. I hope that it won't be taken as me trying to gag anybody. And then, Minister, I really hope you were not feeling attacked personally. I did not intervene because I thought that, members were passionate about the issues that they were raising, and I hope you don't take a personal offense to that. I just have a few questions, but I think a lot of the issues the members have adequately covered what I want to say. And I'm really resisting the temptation to respond to members, but I'm a member, even if I'm sitting here, so I can engage. And the first thing I want to say is that I agree with the President 100%. I didn't have an opportunity to refresh my phone sitting here because I need to focus on the meeting. But if the President says anything that is progressive must be supported, it is desirable, I agree with that. I also agree with the fact that in this country, we need to go and encourage foreign direct investment. We need to embrace technology. We need to embrace innovation. All of that is agreed. And as the minister goes out for comments, and I think as we make our comments and ask our questions as members, at no point should the minister ever believe that there's a drive to block progress. I mean, this is the same committee that meets on a quarterly basis to ask you, how far are you with the National Satellite for Communication Program? Because we embrace technology. But my questions, Minister, is this, and I'm still fixated on the issue that Honorable Tambo asked you, and then Honorable Mkhaga followed up. You said your intention was to align the BBBE Act, so you're not doing away with BE, and I think at some point we're going to have to have a conversation in this committee about BE. But anyway, I digress. You want to align the BBBE Act or the ECA with the BBBE. What is alignment? Let's start there. And then secondly, what powers were you exercising when you decided that you want to align? And I think most importantly then, what legislation confers upon you the powers to do that? Because if we speak about the doctrine of separation of powers, where there are contradictions or need for interpretation of law, you go to court. Where you feel that one law doesn't speak to the other one must be amended, you come to Parliament. So I'm very interested then to understand what powers you were exercising and where you believe that you would derive those powers from. I mean, there's a number of sections that you've quoted when you were speaking. Similarly, we can do the same. Right there on the point where you says the minister may issue directive, it's very explicit that only as permitted in this act. So okay, I think we can have a long conversation. I don't want to go into that. Let me just fire, because I said everybody must manage their time. Minister, what mischief did you think you were trying to also resolve in the sector? Because I asked you, okay, were you having pressure from Washington because of the timing and what? Because when you issue a proposal, and I want to be clear that it's a proposal of a policy directive, it obviously means that there's an intent, you've thought about this thing, you're supposed to act lawfully and rationally. So what is it that made you think that, yeah, this is the thing to do? I must ask South Africans if we should do away with 30%. Because you've said it wasn't pressure. As far as I know, there's no Starlink that has applied here in this country. So what gave you the impression there's a problem? And the reason I ask that question is that there are already companies operating in this country with low Earth orbit satellite capability. Amazon is operating here in conjunction with Vodacom, in partnership with Vodacom. I think they call it Project Caper. Link Global is operating here in partnership with MTN. Liquid Telecoms uses Utelscell. All of them have LEO capability. None of them have complained. The international companies, they can do exactly what Starlight does, whatever you know. So what was the problem, you know? And then last two questions, which I'll also do very, very quickly. In your media statement, you said, once you have received the comments, you will direct ICASA. You will direct ICASA. Those were the direct words that you use. ICASA is a Chapter 9 institution, the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa. The section that you refer to in the ICASA Act in terms of the regulations doesn't say the minister must direct ICASA. It says ICASA can make regulations. So what, maybe if you can just comment on that one. Minister, we have heard from the industry, and I'm sure on these directives they will comment, but they have said they want regulatory parity. They're governed by the ECA. Now you remove 30%. Have you thought about the implication of that to the many shareholders, who not all of them, by the way, well, I don't know the shareholders, but I would assume not all of them are supposedly, you know, these. Have you thought about the fact that those companies will divest their black shareholders? They don't need them anymore because when you said equity equivalence. Why are you taking away from black people the one thing that can make a structural shift in the economy in terms of ownership? You are not bringing anything new with the EEIP. Firstly, because as you said yourself, it's not new. But secondly, because in the industry, that is what also gives black people an opportunity. All the other things that you talk about, skills development, enterprise and supply, they have to do it anyway, in addition to the 30%, because they have to align with the codes. Issues of infrastructure, in this industry, we demand it of them. Universal service obligations, spectrum conditions. So the one thing that we have, in addition to everything that they have to do by law, you then decide, no, let's ask South Africans if we can take it away. Minister, I'm sorry for taking long, but over to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Chairperson, and to the honorable members for those questions. And I think before we actually even deal with the specific questions, I think from us, the politicians, the temperature of robustness can go off the roof. That is fine. You know, I'm big enough to take that. But I think what is important is to be gentle towards the officials in that doing. And I felt at one stage there were unfair attacks on the integrity of the officials of the department. And that, Chair, I think is not correct. Secondly, there are specific themes around the questions that I imagine. One of those is about the nature of the relation between, you know, myself and the committee. And Chair, I must say, I find it surprising that there's this constant reference to the portfolio being caught by surprise engagements. Because in several of the appearances that one has had here in this committee, even this matter has come and been the source of discussions. So there could be no legitimacy to a claim whatsoever that even this process was done in a clandestine manner, particularly because we are at the crucial stage that involves and invites public submission to that. So, I mean, and it's not a matter of English, but it's a matter of factual representation, because we are doing this in an open process, and from each and every step from the beginning of the interaction with ICASA, we have done that and communicated on that. And perhaps to kickstart the responses with both the question that you asked and Honorable Tambo asked about whether there's an element of creativity around the use of alignment and amendment and the perceived mischief. We're trying to address in here a gap. There is a gap in the fact that the regulations, the ownership regulations in particular, as they are framed, speak to one aspect of empowerment, which is only around equity of ownership. And I think it was another honorable member which made the key point around that section 43K, which speaks around the or such other conditions. In fact, it was Honorable Shongwe, although he used it in a different context, to claim incorrectly so that it is opening the gap for some nefarious forces to enter into play. It is not. I think the committee, of course, individual members are entitled to say they do not prefer this option that, you know, the minister is exercising through the policy directive, but it is made for within the instruments of the very same law that we are trying to answer this question. And Chair, I take the point you made that there is no deviation from broad-based black economic empowerment. There is no departure from that. At the very basic root of this question is that while there is the application of 2 points of entry with regards to doing business in South Africa for multinationals, one being the 30% ownership element and the path of the equity equivalent programs, when you go and look into the regulations, it closes that gap because it looks at one avenue. And we say the opening up that we are referring to is that consider those options to be consistently available for any prospective potential investor that then wants to get into the market. There is a process that unfolds beyond that, which is the actual process of an individual application. And every applicant would then have to satisfy the regulator in this regard about the specific nature of how they seek to abide by the licensing conditions that exist after being given permission to do business here in South Africa. And there was I think I'll go to Honorable Stolle in terms of this also notion that you are acting in isolation and you are acting alone. And that is why at the very beginning I referenced the fact that the MTDP, which is the framework of this administration for the 5-year period, which has been adopted by government over a series of engagements, and some of them played themselves out in the public domain, accepted and adopted the full introduction of equity equivalence in the ICT sector as one of the targets to pursue during this period. Taking that into consideration, right, And I want to assure colleagues that the process that kick-started in September last year, leading to the first interaction with ICASA, is of course whenever any new leader assumes a position of responsibility, you study the landscape, you identify where you think that there are areas that require either clarity, intervention, review, and measure the instrument with which to use. And that is why we engage on this process. And the stage of this process where it is now, it's not definitive. It's not definitive because it must also take into consideration what all the inputs that are going to be submitted are going to be. And I'm looking actually forward to engaging with the substance of those inputs. Honorable Stole, I think you were speaking about two different issues when you spoke about the process that ICASA undertook in terms of the inquiry that took place. And if time allows, I would ask the ICASA chair to deal specifically with that so that we are able to release the intertwining of those two issues, because that process unfolded in its own way, and they are able to then answer that. Honorable Ndlela speaks about the discovery that Starlink is operating in the country illegally. Any company that operates in the country through other backward channels, illegal ways, I think the laws of the, in fact, not I think, it must be a must that the laws of the country must be upheld. It must be. Regardless whether they are Malazi satellites or Ndlela satellites or whoever, there must be. And I think the question that you're asking is, they are operating under our nose. Personally, I didn't know about that discovery that we have made. And in all fairness, I think we'll engage with the regulator to be able to set the right course of action going forward. And then there was, there's a lot. Yeah, the other sentiment in here, which I don't want to spend a lot of time around. Of course, there is a lot of audience exhibitioning that is taking place. And that seems to say that you've got a minister who belongs to the Democratic Alliance, who somewhere has a conspiracy to make special dispensation for any interested businesses to operate in our country. Nothing could be further from the truth. And someone asked, am I being bullied? No, I'm not being bullied. I don't take kindly to bullies. And I will not allow myself to be bullied. And then we'll move to the Honorable Makuwele. The Honorable Makuwele had 4 questions. Why should we keep you? Unfortunately, being kept in here is beyond your control. And I'm not being rude, because ministers serve at the pleasure of the president through the formation of the government of national unity. And when are you reversing the Gazette? I think it's important to give the stage of the public comments the rightful place that it enjoys in the process, and let be guided by what these public submissions are saying to that. Who pressured you? Nobody pressured me, as I said. And I underscore that point, because the events that predated this week are important to take into consideration if we're going to deal fairly and substantively with the issue at play. What I do pick up, though, which is a genuine concern of the members of the committee and some of the sentiment of the public, it is saying, why that week, right? And I make the point that depending on what conclusion you want to get to, you'll get any argument that suits that. I made the point earlier that when we communicated on the policy directive, the timeline we were aiming and working with was to finalize the policy direction process by mid-June. We are now in May, and we've gazetted that in the 3rd week of May to allow that process to go through. And I appreciate the fact that some members may view that development and conclude whatever they want to conclude. But it is the following of a due process that has been taking place for some time. Honorable Makuwele, I believe that I'm capable of doing this job. I'm not contemplating any attempt whatsoever to resign. And just for clarity, I don't take the comments made by Honorable Shongwe to be an ad hominem attack whatsoever. And I think I'm advantaged by the fact that we've had prior engagements. In fact, this is the least heated engagement we've had with the portfolio, given how other meetings have gone by. I think there is a passion and there is a deep-rooted concern about 2 things, which also link to what the chairperson said. Regulation parity, same rules for the same players, right? And when we say that, if you consider that you would then have the option of the path of the equity equivalence or sticking to pursuing the 30% ownership, that choice lies upon whoever wants to enter the market. It is a choice that is embedded. It is embedded in the legislation. And it was enacted, colleagues, by the founder of one party in this house that Honorable Shong and Honorable Makuwele represents. So we're not trying to act outside the prescripts of what the law of empowerment says. And there's also this attempt to say, does this have government buy-in? Triple B is a policy of government. It is there. And we're trying to give life to the full spirit of that, so that we don't face an instance where, due to different interpretations, due to different lobbying and considerations, we think that there is a gap, and that gap can be sustained. Because one of the key elements of having, and the committee has been passionate about this, around the issue of policy certainty, is asking all the duality that exists in the interpretation of the policy. I think it was either Honorable Mkhaga, but also 2 other colleagues prior to you mentioned in terms of the question that infers that is one undermining ICASA. No. None at all. And that's why the process says, and the regulator can confirm in this, and it also touches your point in terms of the phrasing and the directive. And the use of the direct is, you could say the language could be better, but it is founded upon which section makes provision for policy directive to be issued. In the end, when the submissions from the public have been considered, they will influence the final formulation of that policy. And then it will state, right, and I try not to get into the permutations because the risk of getting into the permutations may give the incorrect impression that there is a foregone conclusion to an ongoing process. And there isn't a foregone conclusion to an ongoing process, because it reconciles with the point that some members consistently say that why not do, and I think it was Honorable Tambo, and apologies if I'm incorrectly associating with an idea that wasn't yours, why not amend the ECA? Because it will then deal with these issues of mandate overstep and all of that. And I'm saying, colleagues, I am not stuck to what the draft policy is articulating in terms of what it seeks to achieve, because I do not know what the submissions will be. Because there are going to be submissions that may encapsulate some of the views that have been expressed here, some of which have been expressed in the media, and those will then be additional. But what I do know, which we've got a constitutional responsibility to do, is that we must consider those comments, and those comments must be considered properly in informing the final policy direction. And then ultimately, which is why I think there is a fear that in the final formulation of the policy somehow, you would have indirectly placed undue pressure on the regulator to take a particular position on this matter. It is actually the elephant in the room that is not being asked, and I'm doing that deliberately to say that is not the case. Because the regulator has a responsibility to ensure that it does its job regardless of the size of the noise or what is being qualified as an expression. I make the point, which I think Honorable Subrathi or Honorable Matafa was warning against, to say that, I can't say that the authority can't stop the minister. The point I was making, clarifying in that, is that in terms of the process, the authority can express its view. And you have to interrogate that view and be satisfied that does it sufficiently ask the questions one is seeking to resolve with the draft policy or not. And I'm properly empowered to make a determination as to it does that adequately or not. And when I believe that isn't the case, we go to the stage of gazetting, and then we go to the stage of considering the public comment. I've got trust in the public participation process to be able, to express the sentiment of both parliamentarians, both parties, both players in the sector and the public. We are a representative democracy here, and that input has to be taken into consideration. And I would say to colleagues, whether you believe that the step of the policy direction would be one that you would have preferred or you would have taken, there is a public process that is going to unfold to that. Let that process also take its course, and let us measure what the input says in it. Somebody spoke about the risk of litigation. In the interest of openness, and I'm never one to duck and dive questions, it is possible, because any other party that has a divergent view on a policy initiative can feel that the true test of that would be a litigation. But I also believe that the ultimate test of leadership is also being able to lead in a manner that considered all of the options that are at place and making decisions having considered all of that. And I believe that this avenue of the policy directive is legally sound in its substance and its process. And that I further believe that the final submission of the comments will be considered, as they should, in determining the final policy, direction, and most importantly, the shape and the manner in which it looks. Chair, the last point, and I hope this does not degenerate the conversation, but I think it's important because there are some dots being connected. I can't dissociate myself from the fact that the leader of my party was part of the delegation to the US. And I'm a proud member of my party. I'm not apologetic about that. And I belong to a party that is part of this administration. And this administration, through the president and the other members that were in that delegation, have consistently said there was no discussion whatsoever about Starlink. There wasn't. Some of you have shared the sentiment in there. So as to why you would want to implicate me into conversations I wasn't part of in order to shape a narrative of bullying, I don't know what that seeks to achieve, because each and every opportunity, that idea has been squashed by facts. And that's what must lead our conversations, Chair. And that's what I've got a very long appetite for in terms of the engagement. I know that the portfolio committee would, as it should, at any given time where they feel that the minister needs to take us into confidence. Whether we ultimately agree or not is not important. What is important is that the committee wants to have a sense that they've been taken into confidence about what is happening in their space, and that it's fulfilling its responsibility of oversight, and that we account. Whether it is at short notice or what, we must do that. Because it is important that when conversations of this nature, and I appreciate the fact that this is not just, the nature of this conversation is a matter of national importance, and that is why we also have a full complement of attendance from the portfolio committee, right? Because it speaks to that importance of the issue. And those conversations must be had. And as uncomfortable as it may seem to others, we'll always come here and account fully and take responsibility for the actions and the initiatives that we initiated, because we believe they are sound. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. There's a lot of stuff, Honourable Members, you don't have to raise it. I've noted everything everybody has said. There's a lot of stuff that's not answered. But Minister, I'm going to press you on one thing, because you underscored it and you said it was important. I think it was Honourable Mkhaha who asked you, did you consult ICASA, and if so, what did ICASA say? Because as you've said, that is the big issue, because we're also worried about the influence that you are seeking to exert on ICASA. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. When we engaged with ICASA, there are written submission to us, which I'm sure at the at the dictates of the process, it will be shared. Their conclusion was they prefer the option of an amendment of the ECA, and did not rule out that the minister can pursue the angle of the policy directive. They expressed what they would prefer. Thank you.
Okay, honorable members, I think we must wrap this issue up. As always, you are free to write to the minister. Minister, please respond to our letters. You are free to write to the minister if there's issues that you want to take up, if this matter must come back again. Minister, I want to underscore one thing to you. This portfolio committee has been kicking, screaming, saying to you, the legislation is outdated, the policy environment is outdated, the regulations are outdated. You've come to us with a 5-year plan that in the first year does not even look at amending legislation. You're going to be planning to do this. We would not have this problem. What you were supposed to do was to update and bring the ECA, amend it in Parliament. You were supposed to do a policy and regulatory environment overhaul. And I'm saying that now we are chasing our tails running around. And we were promised that by the end of May, today is the 28th. I asked in the House, when are we getting the audio and audiovisual policy? The DG said there straight face, she said end of May. You are going to circumvent, cut corners now because you don't have a policy, and then we're going to have to sit here again. You know, and I think that those are really part of the challenges that you're facing. I'm not going to rule from the chair that members are saying withdraw, others are saying give it the 30 days, others are saying 90 days. Yeah, you didn't put a date, Honorable Makubela, on resignation. I'm not going to rule on those things. I think all of us were expressing our opinions. I do think that where there are areas where there are legal disagreements, which I think are at the core of this, with the principle in particular, the fact that you cannot use regulations to amend a law or to align to any law. And unfortunately, we didn't get a substantive answer to that question. But be that as it may, we do thank you. And I'm sure I'm not going to give ICASA an opportunity to speak. They, like other members of the public, may make their comments. I would just be very keen to find out what would happen if ICASA continues to express their view that they do not agree with you and have a preference of the other route.